Yeah, so that's really one of the interesting things about music for film because it's music is the one element in all of the elements that's not supposed to be real. The acting, um, when you talk about a good actor, they're believable. And sound designers spend hours trying to recreate the exact sound of the rock stone hitting in the alleyway and the echo. But music is this one element that's in there, and we all accept it, but it's not an element that we have in real life. In real life, when the boy kisses the girl, there's not a 60-piece string section that swells to a crescendo. It would be nice if there was, and we all feel it. And I guess that's the point: is music's there to recreate the feeling we all have in life. But it's tricky because it needs to sit in the context of this picture that where everything else is meant to be real, and it needs to support the emotion of what's happening, but not really get noticed. Um, and there's an old saying for composers that if someone notices the music in film, then you've done your job wrong. Um, the point being that you need to be there and you need to be pushing people. And if it needs to be more funny, music can help that. If it needs to be sadder, if it needs to be more emotional, more heroic, music can do all of those things, but it needs to do it without being noticed. That's kind of the trick. An interesting anecdote. It wasn't always that way. If you go back in the history of music, in the early film, people didn't have that same expectation of hearing music in film. And so there always needed to be on screen some excuse for the music to be there. And I remember as a kid watching this old black and white movie, and there's this romantic scene of these two people in a forest and they're dancing around, and there's this beautiful flute music. And then in the background, there's a wandering flute player that just kind of walks through the screen, as if you always had to have some screen representation of what's happening in the score. But of course, these days, we just accept it. Um, how did I get started in film? That is a good question. I guess I've always loved it, and one of my earliest memories was um, as a young boy. We had an old player piano in the basement, and a black and white TV that sat on top. And I would sit there and put on some TV show or something and turn the volume down, and then I would just kind of pretend like I was scoring, and I would play the piano along with whatever I was seeing. And that's kind of where I first fell in love with what music could do for film. What's the next question?
Um, Tell me a little bit about the history of music and films and more about kind of famous cues from the past that everyone does remember and notice.
Right. And so different film composers have different approaches, of course. And obviously, some of the best when you think of memorable music for film and memorable themes, you think of John Williams, for example,
Right.
and his incredible Star Wars themes. And the way he writes, it's a technique that dates back to early opera, but it's where there's motifs. We call them motifs that fit for different characters. And when you hear that motif, you know that that's Luke Skywalker or Darth Vader, and you know that they're in the scene. Even if you don't see them, you hear the music and you know they're coming. Another famous example, of course, is Jaws. And it's just two notes, but when you hear da 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 da, you know the shark's coming. So that's John Williams' genius, is the way he can use even simple melodies to just attach uh, the concept of a character to that character that is a thread throughout the entire film.
Yeah, how do you incorporate that into your projects?
Not as well as John Williams, but I try. One thing I like to do along that same principle is often I'll attach a musical texture or even an instrument to a character. So not only do they have a melodic motif, but they may have an instrumental motif. Hans Zimmer did this famously with the third Batman movie, where I know the director sent him off to go find the Joker's theme. And the story is that he spent weeks coming up with the theme, and when he came back, it's only one note. But it's the texture of the notes, the sound, it's the combination of instruments that he found. And when you hear it, you know that's the Joker. So you can use both melodic ideas and instrumentation and even just textural ideas for thematic content in a film.